Hello, my name is Andy and I am the Village Idiot. I'm armed with a car and a GoPro and an unhealthy amount of time on my hands. I'm using that time to attempt to visit every civil parish in England. You're watching the East Riding of Yorkshire series. Together with the unparished city of Hull, it forms the county of the same name. There's 172 parishes here. Which one are we in today? Welcome back to the East Riding of Yorkshire, everybody. I'm beginning this one in a cemetery, which is marked with this amazing cross with Jesus upon it. There's a plaque that says, "Sweet Jesus, have mercy on all the souls who lay at rest in these grounds, R.I.P." Now, the reason I've begun in this cemetery is because this is a very unusual cemetery. You don't find one of these around all that often. It belongs to an even more unusual church, and you'll find both of those things in the parish of Burton Constable. Here's my disclaimer for people who may be watching me for the first time. I say things as I would in my native accent and dialect. As a result, I may not pronounce things in the same way as the locals do. Remember, I'm a visitor. It's impossible to know everything. Leave me a comment, spin me a like, and bash that subscribe button. Let's get to today's parish video. Welcome back to the East Riding, folks, and yes, you are in the East Riding here. I'll just make that clear right away. The reason I say that is because we're in Burton Constable, not Constable Burton, which is a different place entirely. That can be found in North Yorkshire, but this is very much east. It's a small village with a big landmark. You see, Burton Constable is nothing more than just a mere speck on the landscape, but the Grade 1 listed Burton Constable Hall is well known to many in these parts. It's the largest building in the parish. It's an Elizabethan mansion set in a parkland that was designed by Lancelot Capability Brown. This has been the home of the Constable family for over 400 years. Now open to the public, Burton Constable Hall's features attract thousands of tourists annually. As for the rest of the parish, it also includes the small hamlets of Marton and West Newton, and they themselves are interesting places. One of them features perhaps the most unusual church and churchyard we've ever come across, whilst the other could soon be the location of a major nationally important industry. Marmaduke Tunstall, the 18th century ornithologist, was born out here too. It's all bundled together in an area of the East Riding which has more tractors than it does people. It's a sparsely populated, highly rural slab of land, and yet still commands a high level of local tourism. Let's go see why. We start with the biggest and most important landmark there is in Burton Constable. This is the drive that leads to Burton Constable Hall, whose history can be traced back to the 12th century. With its Elizabethan exterior and Georgian interior, Burton Constable Hall is an architectural marvel. It was built for Sir John Constable, and for more than 400 years, the Constable family lived right here. It's mostly made of brick, but the lower part of its north tower is limestone. That's the oldest part of the house, which dates from the time when a medieval peel tower served to protect the village. In the late 15th century, a new brick manor house was built here. That house would replace Halsham as the Constable family's principal seat. In the 1560s, Sir John Constable embarked on the building of the Elizabethan prodigy house that stands here today. In the 1760s, the house was completely remodelled by William Constable, who commissioned a number of architects we're very familiar with, including John Carr of York. We're now making our way to the car park, which is at the back of the stable block. The original Elizabethan stable block adjacent to the house was demolished and replaced in 1768 by the block that still stands today, designed by Timothy Lightoller. The stables are now a Grade 1 listed building, just like the house itself. Closer to the house is an orangery which was completed in 1782. The grounds that these all stand in were landscaped by Lancelot Capability Brown. The hall and park are today owned by the Burton Constable Foundation, a registered charity, and the house is open to the public. One thing that attracts people to the hall would be its museum, which has existed since at least 1774. That said, its original location is somewhat of a mystery. It originally housed a number of framed drawings. The museum rooms today display, amongst other things, an 18th century telescope, which is thought to be the first in the world to be equatorially mounted. Now, because there was very little else I could film myself, I managed to lay my hands on some drone footage from Burton Constable Hall's very own YouTube channel. This will hopefully show you a bit more. This footage also shows you the extent of the parkland the house sits within, which is all down to Lancelot Capability Brown. It was he who created the two lakes, which are separated by a dam-cum-bridge. Brown also planted clumps of trees, installed sunken fences, and a ha-ha as well. Burton Constable is notable for being one of Brown's best documented projects. The park, of course, existed long before he came along. There was once an ancient moat that stretched around two sides of the hall. To the west, there were three long, narrow fish ponds. In 1715, considerable work was undertaken to level the land for new gardens. The Stove Garden and the Grade 2 listed menagerie at the northern end of the lakes are the work of Thomas Knowlton, the former head gardener of the Lonsborough estate. An unusual feature in the park during the 19th century was the skeleton of a 59-foot-long sperm whale erected on ironwork. The animal had been stranded in 1825 on the shore at nearby Tunstall and was carefully dissected and studied by James Alderson, a celebrated hull surgeon. The whale skeleton was brought to Burton Constable because at that time Sir Clifford Constable was the Lord Paramount of the seigneury of Holderness. This meant he was entitled to anything of interest that washed up on the foreshore. This famous whale also came to the attention of Herman Melville, who described it at length in his 1851 book, Moby Dick. The whale has been an attraction at the hall ever since it came here and can still be seen in the Great Barn. However, over the years, many bones have been liberated as souvenirs by visitors. In 2019, a plea was issued for these to be returned so that the whale could be restored to the state in which it would have been seen by Melville. Right, moving away from the hall and its grounds now, let's take a look at the rest of Burton Constable Parish because there's a lot more to see. On the road north from the hall, if you turn right down what looks like someone's drive, you'll find this, a visitor's car park according to the signs, but for what exactly? So why would there be a random visitor's car park off a road in the middle of nowhere, you ask? Well, because this car park is for a church. It's for the Catholic Church of the Most Holy Sacrament, which looks just like a house. There it is, down there. Let's get a bit closer and you'll see exactly what I mean. Located just within Marton, the Catholic Church of the Most Holy Sacrament was built in 1788 and 79 at the behest of William Constable. He was a prominent Roman Catholic, but his faith barred him from public office. Originally, the family place of worship was at the hall. That was until this church was built as a replacement, resembling a farmhouse. It's one of the most unusual churches in the country. It was designed by Thomas Atkinson of York, and it's a plain rectangular room. Next to it is a small Catholic cemetery. This features the big cross which we saw right at the beginning of this episode. Burton Constable Hall also has its own cemetery. Reputedly, and of course this is all subject to opinion and experience, Burton Constable is supposedly East Yorkshire's most haunted house. True or not, I can categorically confirm that no ghoulies approached me in this cemetery. In fact, this was a pleasant, peaceful little spot. It's perhaps not the most well-known of graveyards in the country, but it's worth finding out, if only for its unique bit of history. The church and its grounds are technically in Marton, but this is all still Burton Constable Parish. This is Marton, an elongated village which joins Burton Constable to New Ellaby. Marton is termed all one settlement these days, but in times past it was split into East Marton and West Marton, and of course the Constable family owned both by the 13th century. East and West Marton had separate agricultural systems, but today they work as one. Agriculture is still the biggest employer in these parts, and there are several farms dotted along the length of this road belonging to the Constable estate. In the late 19th and early 20th centuries, there were between 6 and 8 in Marton, at least 2 of which were 150 acres big. As well as farming, cow keeping and nurserying gave employment to a few of the Marton residents too. Marton used to be a township, and so too did West Newton. That's where we are now. Both were abolished in 1935 and merged with Burton Constable to give us the boundaries we have today. West Newton is a bit more village-like than Marton, but it's the same principle, a long, often windy country lane with scattered houses and farms on either side. The 1991 census data showed there to be less than 20 houses here, and not much has changed since then. Back in the time of Doomsday, West Newton was recorded simply as Newton. Earthworks around the village suggest that it was once a much more closely built settlement, but it's always been small. The older buildings here, which include several farmhouses, are 18th century. There was once a licensed alehouse here too, and in the 1820s the village also had a pub called the Gate Tavern, which has long since disappeared. In case you're wondering, yes, there is an East Newton. That can be found right on the coast within the parish of Aldborough. Very soon, West Newton could look a little different. For some time now, it's been the site of test drilling for gas and oil. In 2014, the locals out here complained that noxious fumes were being emitted from a site near to the village, a smell that was making them sick. In 2019, preliminary data from a borehole suggested that West Newton sits on a natural gas and oil field, and a big one to boot. Under the ground here could be an accessible resource of 189 billion cubic meters of gas, or 31 million barrels of oil. If correct, this would be the biggest onshore gas and oil field in the UK, dwarfing the Salt Fleetby field in Lincolnshire, discovered in 1973. Of course, this is the kind of thing that's not pleased everybody. As I drove around this part of the East Riding, I encountered many signs that said green fields, not gas fields. It's pretty clear that the idea of a natural gas field being exploited here would have some opposition. Protesters have, in recent months, stuck themselves to lorries with glue and blocked access to the West Newton test site, leading to a series of arrests. Nonetheless, you can't deny the significance of the discovery. It's not for me to say which side of the fence I sit on personally. As a YouTuber, I have to remain impartial. One thing's for sure though, this controversial issue is one to keep an eye on over the coming years. Time for me to be off to the next one. I'll see you on the coast next week as we begin to work our way south. Bye for now. Thanks for watching this video, folks. Don't forget to like this episode if you haven't already. It really makes a difference with YouTube. If you're new here, subscribe to the channel for more videos like this, and give us a share too if you've got friends who'd like it. You can find all the links to my social media accounts below, as well as my Buy Me a Coffee page where you can donate to the channel. Also, if you've enjoyed this episode, have a look at some more videos in this series. Until next time, I've been Andy, also known as the Village Idiot, and I'm out.